The 1997 Fox animated film Anastasia is a fictionalized retelling of history, in which the youngest daughter of the last Russian royal family survives the uprising that brought down the monarchy. The film grossed over $58 million in the United States and even inspired a Broadway musical of the same name. But Anastasia's success comes with a price. The film relies on retelling history, though it doesn't necessarily give priority to historical accuracy. Instead, Anastasia is focused on selling the viewer an ideology of romanticized imperialism. An ideology, as defined by Kroto and Hoynes, is a system of meaning that helps define and explain the world, and that makes judgments about that world. In the case of Anastasia, the world is defined by its relationship to Imperial Russia. Things that uphold its power are exalted, and things that don't are condemned.
There was a time, not very long ago, when we lived in an enchanted world of elegant palaces and grand parties.
Anastasia begins by building an enchanted world for the viewer. The royal family is charming and beautiful, and the world outside the palace is assumed to be just as well off. These images tell the viewer that Russia under imperial rule was perfect. The film continues to uphold its ideology through the use of codes. Documentary filmmaker Sut Jahali describes codes as a kind of shorthand language that everyone shares and understands, as well as a set of rules or ways to be in the world. In this movie, we saw two codes that reinforce the notion of romanticized imperialism: sanitized history and anti-communist sentiment. Let's look at sanitized history first.
In the film, this depiction of the Tsarist era under Nicholas II is cast aside in favor of romanticized imperialism. In actuality, the era before communism was anything but beautiful for the majority of Russians who lived in extreme poverty. This practice of glossing over or leaving out actual historical events has been described by historian Mike Wallace as Mickey Mouse history, an oversimplification and commercialization of history to avoid distressing and repelling viewers. The movie depicts Rasputin sealing the fate of the Tsar and his family by sending out minions to incite angry revolutionaries gathered outside the palace.
From that moment on, the spark of unhappiness in our country was fanned into a flame that would soon destroy our lives forever.
In reality, this spark of unhappiness, referred to by the grandmother, had a lot more to do with economic reform and freedom from autocracy rather than Rasputin. Of course, the issues of imperialist Russia are complex for a children's movie to cover fully, but the simplification presents a history that is far from reality. When this view of imperialism is praised and promoted, it can be damaging to young viewers who do not fully comprehend the difference between fiction and reality. The imperialism of Russia was incredibly oppressive of the working class, and glorifying this time period creates a false narrative in which Russia was stable and prosperous under the Tsar. This absolves the Tsar of any accountability for the suffering of his subjects. In the end, the revolution was inevitable. With the Russian people looking for reforms and some grasp of independence, the autocratic system of the Tsar was a fading tradition that could no longer be upheld. The Tsar was abdicated and put into captivity along with the rest of his family. In the end, they were moved from St. Petersburg to Siberia and were eventually brutally executed.
This leads us to the second theme we identified in the film, which we refer to as anti-communist rhetoric. One of the most prevalent ways is the stark contrast between how the royal family is portrayed as glamorous and regal, while negative imagery surrounds the revolution and Bolsheviks. This creates a skewed portrayal in a frame that is firmly anti-communist and consequently romanticizes the imperialist ideology. we see civilians working unappealing jobs in bad conditions and pining for their lives before the revolution.
St. Petersburg is gloomy.
St. Petersburg is bleak.
My underwear got frozen standing here all week.
Despite the fact that Russians also worked before the Soviet regime, we only see them unhappily toiling away after the revolution occurs, creating a firmly anti-communist frame. This framing begins even before Russia actually becomes a communist entity, when Rasputin curses the royal family and sells his soul to gain power. The new communist government becomes a direct consequence of Romanov's deaths, in which the Russian people suffer. Because of this frame, Rasputin becomes a connection between literal evil and communism. This negative framing continues with the main character's goals to leave Russia. Dmitri and Vlad desperately want to be wealthy and out of Russia.
We'll be rich!
We'll be rich.
We'll be out!
We'll be out.
And Anya's attempt to leave for Paris is foiled by an aggressive official with a clear Soviet symbol on his hat.
No exit visa? No ticket!
The group does eventually make their way to Paris, and it is noticeably shown in a more positive light. Everyone is well dressed in fashionable clothing, and there is an entire song dedicated to shopping in Paris and celebrating their freedom from Russia. These extravagant scenes become a type of vicarious living for viewers. Both pre- and post-revolution, viewers live vicariously in a positive manner only outside of communist Russia. This furthers to alienate the audience from any positive connotations of communism, relegating positive sentiments only for imperialist Russia and capitalism in 1920s Paris. While escaping to Paris is a pivotal plot point, the true happy ending only comes with the death of Rasputin, the symbolic and ultimate connection to Soviet Russia. By killing Rasputin, the protagonists are able to cut all of their remaining ties to Soviet Russia, firmly placing communism as the main villain in the film through the guise of Rasputin.
For you! Das Vidanya!
In reality, Anastasia never escaped Russia or reunited with her grandmother. Instead, she and her family were shot in the basement of a house in Siberia. The filmmakers forego these dark facts, instead focusing on romanticizing a version of imperialism that never existed. By distorting a historical event into a child-friendly narrative, the filmmakers inevitably leave children with a light-hearted, entertaining film with little substance or accuracy.